All right, so let's dive right into this study. What really struck me was how it looks at this, this whole shift to new ways of working and how it's changing how people in Bavaria are getting around.
Yeah.
It's not just theory.
Yeah.
Are we working from home or not?
Yeah.
This study actually digs into like our commutes where we're choosing to live, even like what kind of transportation we prefer.
Right.
And we're talking about a study from a Bavarian Business Association conducted by Prognos AG, a pretty well-respected research institute.
Yeah.
And this is from March 2025, so it's hot off the presses.
Yeah.
So I guess our mission here is to really try to pull out the key insights. What does all this mean for, our listeners out there? Like, how do we make sense of all this change happening?
And it is fascinating that a business association is taking such a deep dive into this whole mobility question.
Yeah.
It shows just how intertwined the future of work is with things like infrastructure and regional planning.
Absolutely. And here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
This study breaks down new work into 4 main types.
Okay.
So we've got working exclusively from home, which includes the traditional telework.
Right.
We've got working from anywhere, which could even mean, across borders.
Yeah.
Utilizing co-working spaces, and then, of course, flexible work hours.
Yeah.
So things like flexi-time arrangements.
Right.
Now, they use mobile working as kind of this umbrella term for working from home and working from anywhere.
Okay.
And then they specifically use home office just for working from your own residence.
Okay. Got it.
So keeping these definitions in mind is going to be really key as we go through this, because what's clear right away is that these ways of working aren't going anywhere.
Yeah.
They're not a pandemic blip.
Yeah.
This is becoming like a core part of the Bavarian work landscape.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, flexible working hours were already pretty common before 2020, but the pandemic really just accelerated that whole shift toward, the home office and these other forms of mobile working. And I think this study gives us a really good snapshot of what's become the new normal, or at least the direction things are heading.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's talk practicalities. What does this all mean for how we're getting around every day?
Right.
The study highlights that flexible working hours are actually helping to spread out those classic rush hour peaks.
Okay.
So instead of everyone hitting the roads and the trains at the same time, people with flexi-time or, trust-based working hours, they're shifting their travel times, which could potentially, ease some of that pressure on our infrastructure. But the study is also very clear that big infrastructure projects like Munich's second S-Bahn line are still completely crucial for long-term capacity.
Right. So it's not an either or, it's both and.
It's both and.
Yeah.
And this shift towards more like distributed commuting, I think also means we need to get a lot smarter about how we manage traffic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Things like responsive traffic lights that can adjust to conditions in real time. We need to keep expanding dedicated bike lanes, which are becoming even more important for those shorter trips.
Yeah.
The ones that aren't work-related.
Yeah.
But obviously, this all needs to be balanced with, the needs of commercial traffic so we can keep the economy running.
For sure. For sure. And I think this also presents a really good opportunity to rethink our approach to public transportation.
Yeah.
Potentially, more flexible schedules, maybe even smaller, more agile vehicles, denser networks that can really adapt to these changing demands.
Right.
All of this could be supported by what they're calling smart mobility data, which is essentially data collected from all sorts of sources. Right. Traffic sensors, public transport usage patterns, that kind of thing.
So it's like using data to make the whole system more efficient.
Exactly. And this raises the question of how we're going to fund public transportation in the future and how we plan routes if that peak demand isn't as pronounced as it used to be. The old model of running these large, infrequent services might need to be rethought. Maybe we need to move towards these more dynamic, data-driven approaches.
Right. They can actually cater to how people are actually commuting now.
Exactly.
Now, here's something I thought was really interesting. People who mainly work from home seem to like public transport more.
Oh, really?
Not just for the occasional office trip, but for like running errands too. Since the pandemic, these home office users say they're using their cars less overall, especially for work, and walking and cycling have become way more popular for those local trips.
That's interesting.
It's almost like because they're not doing that daily car commute anymore, they're just less likely to automatically hop in the car for other things too.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a psychological aspect to it. Like if you break that ingrained habit of the daily car commute, maybe you start to see all sorts of trips differently.
It's like decoupling work travel from personal travel. And the study also found some interesting regional differences.
Oh, okay.
Like the areas around Munich and Nuremberg, which are more urbanized, they rely on cars less for work than some of the more rural parts of Bavaria.
Right, which makes sense, I guess.
Yeah, areas with well-established public transport networks.
Yeah.
They're probably better equipped to handle these shifts away from the traditional office commute.
Absolutely. I mean, if you've already got good alternatives to driving,
right,
that transition to flexible work is going to be a lot smoother.
So smoother for both the individual and for the system.
Exactly.
Now let's connect this to where people are choosing to live.
Okay.
About a quarter of those who are using these new work models have either already moved or they're planning to. And there's a flight trend towards the suburbs.
Okay.
So this obviously creates a demand for new housing in those areas.
Right.
But it also highlights the need for better public transport links.
Yeah.
The study specifically mentions that even on the outskirts of big cities, the train and bus services can be pretty lacking.
Oh, wow.
So for our listeners out there, if you're thinking of moving further out to take advantage of remote work, don't just look at the housing prices. Do your research on the public transport situation.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, that trend towards suburban living, even if it's slight right now, it has huge implications for how we plan our infrastructure.
Yeah.
It's not just about building more houses. It's about connecting these new areas with jobs and making sure they have good transportation options within the area.
Absolutely.
So it's something to really think about, if you're weighing up those potential cost savings and the lifestyle benefits of the suburbs against those transport limitations.
Especially if you still need to go to the office sometime.
Exactly.
And this brings us to the distances people are willing to travel for work.
Okay.
The study found that people who work from home tend to live further away from their actual workplaces.
Okay.
And this average distance is only going to increase. Right now, the average home office user in Bavaria travels almost 9 kilometers more to their workplace than those who don't work remotely.
Yeah.
And that's if they were to actually go in.
Right.
And in the future, that could jump to 10 kilometers more.
That's a big difference.
It is. And the people who work entirely from home, they're the ones living the furthest away.
Oh, interesting.
So it seems like having the option to work remotely makes those longer commutes for the occasional in-person day more palatable.
More acceptable.
More acceptable, yeah.
It's fascinating how our perception of distance changes.
Yeah.
When we don't have to do that commute every single day.
Right. It's not this constant grind anymore.
Exactly. It changes the whole equation.
And this could actually be a good thing for companies in more remote areas.
Oh, how so?
Well, if they offer flexible work arrangements,
yeah,
they might have a much easier time attracting talent.
That makes sense.
People aren't limited to living, super close to the office anymore.
It could really level the playing field.
Right.
Between, companies in the big cities and those in more rural areas.
Now, here's something I think our listeners might find really interesting. How much of that offered home office time are people actually using?
Okay.
Well, across all employment levels in Bavaria, people are working from home less often than they're allowed to.
Oh, really?
And it seems like those single home office days are super popular.
Okay.
So even though people have the option for more remote work, a lot of them seem happy with just 1 or 2 days at home a week.
Huh.
So the potential for reducing traffic through home office, it's not being fully realized yet.
Interesting.
The study says that only about 68% of offered home office days are actually being taken.
So it makes you wonder, what's the ideal balance between remote and in-office work? Yeah. Not just for the employees, but for the employers, too.
Absolutely. And, even though there's this clear trend toward flexibility, it seems like people still value in-person interaction. And maybe that structure that comes with office work, the option's there, but people aren't necessarily maximizing it.
Right. And it makes you think about what those factors are.
Yeah.
Is it collaboration? Is it social connection?
Yeah.
Or maybe just those routines that we've built up around office life?
And there's this gap between the potential for traffic reduction and the actual impact.
Right.
So just offering home office doesn't automatically change how people commute.
It's more complicated than that.
It is.
I mean, people's individual preferences, the type of job they do, even company culture, all of these things probably play a role in how often people choose to work remotely.
Absolutely. Now let's shift gears a bit and think about the impact on company locations themselves.
Okay.
New work is leading to less office space being used.
Right.
A lot of big service companies are downsizing their offices or planning to.
Yeah.
And this could have a pretty big effect on the commercial real estate market in the long run.
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about it from an economic perspective, if the demand for traditional office space keeps going down, property values could take a hit, especially in less desirable areas.
Right. But it also creates these opportunities to repurpose those buildings.
Right.
Maybe into residential spaces or mixed-use development.
Exactly.
But here's the thing. While the total demand for office space might be shrinking,
there
could be this shift towards, those prime locations.
Sure. Interesting.
Those inner city spots. Central business districts. Companies might want those well-connected collaborative hubs in the best areas.
Right, so it's not just about less space. It's about different kinds of space.
Exactly. And this could actually lead to more traffic in those city centers.
Oh, wow.
On the days when people do come in.
Right.
Which just highlights how important it is to have good public transport and alternative mobility options within cities.
Absolutely. I mean, the nature of the demand is changing. But it's not going away completely.
And the study also looked at how companies are adjusting to all of this.
Okay.
About half of the Bavarian companies they surveyed are offering some kind of mobility benefit to their employees.
Okay.
So things like company bikes, job tickets for public transport company cars.
It's great to see companies being proactive about this, trying to encourage more sustainable commuting.
But here's the interesting part. Most companies haven't actually seen a big change in how these benefits are being used.
Oh, really?
After employees move because of new work.
So people aren't necessarily using those benefits more.
Right, but more and more employees are asking for better public transport access or better bike path connections.
Okay, so the needs are changing.
They are.
Even if the current benefits aren't quite meeting those needs yet.
Right, it seems like there's this growing awareness of sustainable commuting.
Yeah.
And maybe the company offerings need to catch up a bit.
Adapt to the new reality.
Exactly. Now, one thing that really got me thinking was this whole debate about whether new work actually reduces travel overall.
Right.
And, CO2 emissions, it seems obvious that fewer commutes would mean less travel.
Yeah.
But new travel patterns can pop up.
Oh, like what?
Well, you might have more trips for team events or to those co-working spaces.
Right.
And on the personal side, people working from home might take more leisure trips.
Yeah.
Or they still need to run errands that they use to combine with their commute.
That's true.
So the study emphasizes that we need more research to really understand this whole complicated relationship between new work and mobility.
Yeah, I mean, it's not as simple as just assuming less commuting equals less impact on the environment.
Right.
We have to look at those new types of travel.
Exactly. And it's a real challenge for policymakers and anyone focused on sustainability. How do we make sure that this shift to new work actually helps us reach those environmental goals?
Right.
Instead of just shifting the problem around.
Right. Shifting where and when we travel, but not actually reducing it.
Exactly. Now, looking ahead, the study suggests that most people in Bavaria are actually pretty happy with their current mix of remote and in-office work.
Okay.
And they don't plan on making any big changes.
So a sense of stability.
Yeah. But there is this interesting finding that part-time employees are more likely to want to go back to the office more often.
Huh. I wonder why that is.
And this could lead to more traffic in the middle of the day.
Yeah, outside those traditional rush hours.
Right, which, again, highlights the need for good public transport throughout the day.
Not just at peak times.
Not just at peak times. And here's another fascinating tidbit. People who live over 100 kilometers away from work, they're more likely to want to increase their office time.
Wow, really?
While those living closer want to reduce it.
That's counterintuitive.
It is. It's almost like if you're already making that long commute, you want to make it worthwhile by having more face-to-face interaction.
It's about quality, not quantity.
All right, so let's bring it all together.
Okay.
You've given us a lot to think about here.
Yeah.
What's the big takeaway?
Well, I think it's clear that how and where we work is undergoing a pretty major transformation. And that's having a ripple effect on how we get around the flexibility of new work. Yeah. It's changing our daily routines and our whole relationship with transportation.
And it's all interconnected.
Absolutely. I mean, the changes in work patterns are influencing where people choose to live. And those choices are then impacting transportation demands.
Right. It's a complex system.
It is.
And it requires us to adapt.
Both as individuals and as a society.
So here's a final thought for our listeners.
Okay.
Given all these changes, how do you think the idea of a commute might change in the future?
That's a good question.
Will we see more of those occasional longer trips to a central hub instead of the daily grind?
Interesting.
And how will our cities and our transportation systems need to adapt to that? I mean, this study gives us a glimpse into that potential future.
It does.
And it's definitely something worth pondering.
It is. This really highlights that the evolution of work, it's not over.
It's an ongoing process.
Exactly. And how we move around is going to keep playing a huge role in shaping our lives and our communities.
In ways we might not even expect.
Absolutely.
So much to think about.
Yeah, lots to consider.
Thanks for sharing this study with us.
Our pleasure.
It's been a really fascinating deep dive.
It has.
To all our listeners out there, thanks for tuning in.
Until next time.
And keep those wheels turning.
Yeah, keep thinking about how you move.